Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Expert Advisory Community webinar. Thank you to those that have been signed on for a few minutes. We are ready to get started.
Thank you, Rati, and good morning, everyone. This is Beth Schlachter. I'm Executive Director here at FP2020, and thank you for taking your time to join us this morning and for this briefing and update, and for your interest and enthusiasm to be on the EAC, our Expert Advisory Community. So before we get started, I want to turn it back to Rati because she has a few housekeeping rules, and we'll explain how we're going to technically run the webinar this morning. So back to you, Rati.
Thanks, Beth. Thank you again, everyone, for joining us in the webinar room. Before we get started, I'd just like to take you through a few logistical. First, you should be seeing in front of you a presentation, and to the side of that you will see 3 pods. One is the pod that will show you all of the attendees in the webinar. One is the Q&A pod right underneath that where you can submit questions, and then the third is the chat feature. In terms of questions, we encourage you to submit questions at any point during the webinar. When submitting your question, please just let us know if you're dialed in on the phone or if you're using your computer mic. When we open up the Q&A section, that will allow us to unmute your phone line and give you mic privileges so that you can ask your question as well as any follow-ups that you may have. Also, in terms of the audio, everyone is currently muted. If you're on the phone, you are able to unmute yourself by pressing *6, but we request that you do not unmute yourself until you're called upon. In terms of if there's any assistance that you need, any technical assistance at any point during the webinar, if you have any issues, please use the chat feature to reach us or submit a question through the Q&A and we will help troubleshoot the issue. Also, last point, the presentation is being recorded and will be made available to you after the webinar. Thank you. And with that, back to you, Beth.
Thank you, Rati. So let's start with a look at our agenda this morning. We have an hour together, and so we're going to do our best to keep our briefing to 30 minutes so that we can have 30 minutes to hear from all of you and for the Q&A. So we'll be going through a brief partnership update, letting you know what we've been doing here at the Secretariat since really since the beginning of the year, and certainly since we last spoke in March. And we'll be talking about the midpoint and reference group updates. And then you'll have a chance to hear from many of the new colleagues here at the FP2020 Secretariat. Part of what we've been busy doing, certainly since March in earnest, has been rebuilding our staff since we have a new strategic direction that you're all familiar with from last year. We're now almost fully staffed, and so there's been a lot of effort within that, and you'll meet some of the new colleagues here this morning. Then we'll also do the portfolio updates that the new colleagues are leading, including on country support and global advocacy, rights, and youth. And then we'll get to that section on Q&A where we'll talk together a bit. So then I wanted to just start by linking back to the EAC itself, to all of you, and again to thank you for joining. And we launched this with a lot of enthusiasm and realize as well that happened with all of the other various efforts that were taking place during the spring that you'll hear more about. It was a bit of a reach for us to get to this group in a meaningful way, but I feel like we're now really well positioned to really build this relationship with you and make this really meaningful and engaging. We have had a chance to work with many of you in some areas, so sections of the EAC have been supporting some of our work, including on rights and youth, and you'll hear more about that in a little bit. But we really you here with us, both so that we can create this opportunity to share with you what's going on, broader partnership, but certainly from our perch, and to then have the opportunity to benefit from your expertise and your positions as well so that we can make this movement as strong as possible. So again, we did officially launch in April of this year, and we have 135 members, which is really great. Many of you know that we created a seat on our reference group for a young person who's connected to youth constituencies, and through that process of selecting that person, we were young and youth networks that we created a group within that to invite them into the process. So many of those folks are on the line with us this morning. So it's an integrated group, but also a really solid way for us to be able to draw on some of the youth networks that are already up and functioning in large part through many of the organizations that you all represent on the phone this morning as well. So that's very exciting. We also have then expertise that represent 50 of the 69 focus countries. So again, as things really begin to churn over this summer and through the end of this year, we're excited about the opportunity to engage with you in some very specific ways. So with that, let's move on to the rest of the next slide. Thank you. So we wanted to give you again an update since we last spoke in March, again to let you know what we've been doing and what we've been seeing and hearing. So a lot of I'm going to be talking sort of from the high level view, and then you'll be hearing again from each of the individual portfolios. But we do want to highlight the ways in which we think that things are continuing to really build on that momentum based on the hard work of partners across the world. So again, we this year continue to have new partners who were joining us. Last year, we were excited to say that we'd had the largest number of new partners join, and this year we've exceeded that. So the enthusiasm for being part of this momentum continues to grow, which is really exciting because I think that just makes us stronger together. So we've had 3 new countries. We made a real effort to push into the Asia region in this last year, knowing we were going to be in Bali for ICFP. So Afghanistan, Laos, PDR, and Vietnam had joined, which I think brings in some countries as well that development partners have certainly been in, but they are not as well known maybe to the family planning sector across as some other countries. So I think an exciting opportunity there to build new relationships. We're also thrilled that PSI made a commitment and joined FP2020 as well, in addition to the Margaret Pike Trust with the Population and Sustainability Network. Again, we continue to build data and evidence for family planning, and as we do that, a key piece of the work, and a lot of the focus now is on data use and strengthening that. So you'll be hearing more about that this morning as well. We've also been working at the global level to ensure, again, that now that family planning is clearly an element and an important element within the SDGs, that we build an understanding about the cross-sectoral impact and the potential that family planning really building our evidence base, and you'll hear more about this, about rights-based programming and the impact of that, and new ways that we can measure this and articulate what the impact of rights-based family planning programs are, especially as we are now in this world of sustainability. So with that, I just wanted to also share that we had a couple of renewed commitments as well. The German government renewed their commitment intra-health, which is very exciting as well. So I think that last year, when we looked at our data, we saw that our progress was off. We put out a call to the community, knowing that everybody had really already been doubling down on their efforts and taking advantage of this moment of sort of a raised profile for family planning within the development space to really do all that we can together to advance family planning. So seeing that other partnership that some of our commitment makers are reassessing what the impact of their commitment has meant and what more they can do has been really exciting as well. For the next slide, I just wanted to let you know, and many of you participated in various moments as well, that we did mark our midpoint of the FP2020 process in July. It was the 4-year point since the London Summit, so a moment of celebration for what the summit had been and launched, and then an opportunity to sort of assess our progress since then and to really make sure that we're positioned to do all we can over the next 4 years. So at FP2020, we decided not to have a large global moment, but rather ask partners to use the moment to assess progress within their own context, either at the country or within any particular organization. We were in London for our reference group meeting in June, and so we took advantage of that moment to meet with the London community, in particular since they were the co-hosts of the London Summit and played such a critical role. We had an event there to mark that moment, and many partners on the phone helped to organize that and do some creative thinking, and that was CIF and IPPF who really helped as well. We wanted to have a youth focus, knowing that youth are so key to both family planning and sustainability. And we brought that youth theme forward as well when we had an event here in DC in terms of understanding youth and youth data and opportunities there. And we're joined by partners such as PSI and World Bank and Jackie Derrick from Guttmacher and UNFPA. And we're very pleased that UNF were able to host that event for us as well, showing UNF's commitment, longstanding commitment to family planning as well. So the moment really then more, from transitioned into our reference group meeting where the reference group had a chance to take a look at the first draft of our data. For 2016, we'll be launching our next report in the fall, as we do every year. We'll be doing this on November 1st. We have our next reference group meeting in Tanzania, so we'll be launching the report there. Even though we're not in a position to share the draft of what the data are indicating at this point, and Martin will be sharing more about the sort of data process over the course of the summer as we look to launching that report, there was an opportunity for the reference group to be able to assess progress at this midpoint moment and to determine together what their course of action is going to be. And just to share a bit of insight from my perspective about the reference group and what I've seen over the last couple of years in terms of how they work together as a group. And some of you may have already heard me say this, but when I first joined FP2020, I think the reference group was really transitioning from that phase of being the architects of what FP2020 would be. They've been really internally process and building that and understanding what was happening as the working groups. And then as we transitioned through the review last summer, it was really a chance for them as well. And when we recognized that we were off progress from what we had hoped to be, the group to really coalesce around this idea of accountability both to one another as reference group members, as individuals, and then to the broader community as the leaders of the organizations that are many of the organizations that are so critical to our progress globally. So they've been really working to challenge what that accountability looks and feels like, what they bring to those meetings, and then how they then take what they hear and discuss together and push that out through their processes. So there's a lot of focus on that at the moment, and to understanding the data and to then digesting that within the context of any particular organization. So it's really now a very dynamic discussion about that's more really sort of action-oriented externally based on understandings that they build as a group. Recognizing as well now that we have the World Bank on the reference group and that the GFF is such a key piece of, well, an opportunity. I think we're still all waiting to see how it finally does play out at the end of the day with regard to family planning. We've decided to host this next reference group meeting in the fall in partnership with the World Bank, the GFF Investors Group. So we will be there all week. Monday, Tuesday will be the FP2020 reference group meeting. That week, Wednesday will be a bridge day where members of both the Investors Group and the reference group will be looking together at the evidence and some analysis of how family planning has fared within the GFF country by country so far, so that we can be as strongly positioned both to make some support some changes within countries that are already operating under the GFF, and if there is a third wave, to ensure that we do that in the strongest possible way for family planning. And then the GFF will host their investors group meeting that Thursday and Friday. So it's a really, I think, important and key opportunity to really come to some solid understandings, again, of how family planning has fared within the GFF. So we look forward to sharing more about that with you as we develop that agenda, and we'll look forward to partnering with some of you as well on how we can make that as strong a day as possible. So with that, I'm going to turn over now to Martin Smith, our Managing Director, who's going to share some key highlights from our portfolio work over the last few months. Martin?
Thank you very much indeed, Beth, and good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. We will take the next 20 minutes or so to go through the FP2020 Secretariat's portfolios. I will speak in a moment about data, as Beth said. We will then move in to talk about country action with Eva Ross, our new Country Support Director. And then we will move into a section on rights and youth, led by Sandra Jordan, our Global Advocacy Rights and Youth Director, and Emily Sullivan, our Youth Engagement Manager here at the Secretariat. So let's just talk data for a moment, and I hope you can see this diagram, the schematic here on the PowerPoint, which really details the significant work that goes into the production of the very important FP 2020 annual report every year. And as you can see, data collection has been going on in this process since the very beginning of 2016, drawn from a wide range of sources, of course, from those countries that have had DHSs since the time of the last report, have had mixed surveys and other national surveys that include family planning, data that's drawn from the increasing number of countries that have PMA 2020 facility and household-based surveys, and very importantly, the data that's collected by UNFPA and other partners, particularly around commodities and expenditures. All of this information has been fed into a series of consensus workshops which happen at country level and have happened over the last few months. A key point to note here is the number of countries that are now using service statistics as part of those consensus meetings. As you may have seen from the report last year, we had service statistics in 4 countries that we included in the 2015 annual report. We hope to increase that 4-fold or even 5-fold in terms of the number of countries that will use service statistics to feed into the family planning estimation tool, so that we know we have a very good estimation of where they are with regard to several of the FP 2020 core indicators. So as I say, those workshops have been going on. It's great to be able to report that they are almost completed. We're just waiting for one of the final workshops to happen towards the end of this week. And the Track 20 M&E officers have been working with the in-country stakeholders and with Track 20 at a global level, and with Jason Bremner and his team. Jason is our new Data and Performance Management Director, to get all of that information together so that we can start to write the annual report. And that process is in fact already underway. And as Beth set out earlier on, that report will be ready for launch at the very end of October. The information is embargoed for the moment. There are still some changes that are happening as a result of finalization in country, but we will bring that information to you very soon after the launch of the report, and we intend to have an expert advisory community webinar in November, in which we will give you the opportunity to delve into that data with us in a considerable amount of detail. Lastly, the very important PME working group, Performance Monitoring and Evidence Working Group, will convene here in Washington, D.C. in about 10 days' time to go through all of the information that we have from countries and make sure that the report that we're going to be producing at the end of October remains really at the very cutting edge of measuring our progress towards FP 2020's goals and pushing the family planning measurement agenda even further. Before I move on and hand over to Eva to talk about country support, a brief comment about an upcoming webinar. At FP 2020, we want to be able to offer a range of webinars that really present innovative, challenging, important information, again at the cutting edge of family planning work. And on the 30th of August, between 9:30 and 10:30 Eastern Time, we will present a webinar in partnership with IBP, Implementing Best Practices, and the High Impact Practices initiatives. And that webinar will focus on addressing inequities in access to family planning services and commodities, all about mobile outreach services. So we're going to hear from experts who have great experience in designing, implementing and advocating for mobile outreach services with evidence that will demonstrate that information services and contraceptives can be enhanced by this approach, and the mobile outreach approach can strengthen local health workers' knowledge and skills. We're very lucky to have Maggie Farrell from USAID, Tom Elam, who's the outreach director from MSI, Ibrahim Mohammed from Planned Parenthood in Nigeria within this webinar, and we do very much hope that you will all join us for this important webinar in our series. And this webinar will be facilitated by Everoth, our Country Support Director, who I'd like to hand over to now, who will take you through country action and our new country support portfolio here at the Secretariat. Thank you, Eva.
Thank you, Martin, and good morning and good afternoon to all of you colleagues of the EAC. Earlier you heard a little bit about some of these new and renewed commitments to FP 2020, and we're really proud to note that 38 of those commitments are from these FP 2020 countries. It breaks down roughly 11 in Asia, 14 in Anglophone Africa, and 13 in Francophone Africa, and this includes all 9 of the Ouagadougou Partnership countries. We are currently under discussions with other countries as well and hope to announce additional commitments to FP 2020 in the coming months, so please stay tuned. As Beth mentioned, one of the pillars under FP 2020's newly launched strategy is on driving country impact. This aspect of the strategy really evolved and builds on the great work from the Country Engagement Working Group, as well as a global focal point workshop that was held in Istanbul March of last year. Under this new country-driven approach, we have really focused on strengthening the relationships that already existed with the country's focal points and really focused on a very strong engagement with them. As you all might know, these focal points include representatives from the government, from UNFPA and USAID. And in some countries, that also includes representatives from GFF or the Gates Foundation. Also excited to share with you all that over the last few months, our team now is fully staffed and comprises of 3 regional managers and associates that closely work with the focal points in the 3 regions I mentioned earlier. So what have we been doing over the last few months? Over the last 6 months, FP 2020 has been organizing focal point workshops in each of these 3 regions. And we are very lucky that for the Francophone Africa workshop, we had the opportunity to very closely collaborate with our colleagues at the Ouagadougou Partnership Coordinating Unit in Dakar. And we'll continue to work closely with them as we work in these 9 countries. The purpose of these workshops were really to bring together each of the country's focal points, and over the course of a 2-day period, they drafted an action plan that detailed some of the country's challenges and opportunities. I'll share those with you in an upcoming slide. These country-driven action plans are meant to look ahead over an approximately 18-month period and are meant to be aligned with a country's national family planning strategy, as well as that country's cost and implementation plan, a CIP, if they have one. As you can see from the slide we have right now on the screen, these are some of the pictures from the really fun gatherings that we had over the last 6 months. The picture on the top is from our Francophone Africa workshop. The bottom left is from our Asia workshop, and the bottom right is from Anglophone Africa. As I mentioned earlier, we've included a summary of some of those challenges surfaced in each regional workshop. And as you can see here, there is a common thread. We'll share these slides so you can read these and certainly get back to us with any questions or additional information you might need. But as you can see, there's really a common thread across countries and across regions around challenges around commodity security, supply chain, improving access to data and also its effective use, whether it's at the policy level or for advocacy use, and of course also reaching young people and addressing their lack of access to services. Next slide, please. We also wanted to share that in collaboration with colleagues here at the Secretariat from the Data and Performance Management and Communication teams, we're working on updating the country pages on our website. This is to really ensure that the new pages will serve as a resource to all of you, but also to the greater family planning community, and really ensuring more transparency. You can see here a beta version of this new page, where we'll feature each country's key documents, and so this will include everything from their FP 2020 commitments, their action plans, among many others, and we'll also feature the CIPs and GFF investment cases for the countries where that applies. Along with those key documents, in these revamped country pages, we'll also feature the latest data for each country, everything from a general information look to more specific data around the core indicators. And we're excited that we'll be launching these new country pages when we launch our progress report at the upcoming reference group meeting at the end of October. I'd like to turn it over now to my colleague Sandra, who's going to share FP 2020 and how we're advancing the Rights and Youth agenda.
Thanks a lot, Eva, and good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. It's really great to catch up with everybody on the work that we're doing in rights-based family planning, and just to note that we are building on and advancing the very good work that the Rights and Empowerment Working Group had done and is still supporting, and just the strength of the things that you provided, FP 2020 continues to live and continues to guide us. So I want to thank everybody that was part of that. I see there are several of you as part of the webinar, so thanks a lot. Moving forward, we're working to share what a rights-based approach is. So we had a 2-day program consultation in London in early June to share current work and approaches that are going on, and we have about 23 programs globally that are implementing partners that are working on these programs sort of kind of organically, I guess you can say. It's not necessarily this is a rights-based family planning program, but they're evolving that way. So people came together. We had about 50 people, and they came together to share what they're learning in the process of putting this together, what can be pulled out to show how others can do it. And it was 2 days that I was so impressed. Not a single soul picked up their telephone or opened their computer. So we had a lot of attention and awareness, and extremely positive reception. So we'll have a meeting report that's coming out. We're editing it at present, and it'll be released in September around UNGA, along with a campaign to build a community of practice and increase awareness around rights-based family planning. And then we're scheduling some webinars in September. One will be to kind of kick off this whole, the report and lessons learned, and get some people, some of the folks that have designed good programs talking about it. And then our goal is to build towards an evidence meeting in 2017, so we can really show people that rights-based programs make a difference, that they are, require more interrogation rather than more money or effort to create, and to really get the focus on women's needs, women's rights, men and women's needs and rights. And so we also are hoping to do a cost analysis so we can share this information with donors as well as implementing partners to say, you know, it's just going to be $10 more or $10,000 more or whatever. So our next steps going forward are to increase the guidance on rights-based family planning for the country teams working on the costed implementation plans and in the work plans and work with advocates. And so we have several programs in progress on that I can report at a different time. And then we are having meetings with other sectors to share the approaches. The interagency working group on gender has been they were very interested. They came for a meeting, and now they're firmly with us. And so we're going to be planning another meeting with USAID to reach this group. And we're reaching out also to the maternal child health community, and they're very interested in lessons learned. And so next we'll be reaching out to the AIDS community. So we'll be touching base with some of you to help as we advance this work. And a lot of rights also embrace youth and young people's issues. And so I'll turn it over to my colleague Emily, who manages our youth program, and she can tell you a little bit about what she's been doing. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, Sandra. As Sandra mentioned, I'm the Youth Engagement Manager, and today I'm just going to provide you with a brief youth update. As Eva mentioned earlier, during the FP 2020 focal point meetings that occurred earlier this year, some more recently than others, there was a considerable focus on youth during both the focal point meetings and during our stakeholder meeting, which occurred after the focal point meetings. Young people did attend the stakeholders meeting. Specifically, during the focal point meetings, there was a session on youth, and youth technical experts were available during the for consultation during the action plan development. As could be seen earlier in Eva's slides, there was a strong youth focus in those plans. We are now supporting this interest and this priority with quarterly calls. These calls with our focal points allow for a unique opportunity to inquire about how young people are being engaged in completing this youth-related work. As for other ways that we're engaging young people, as many of you know, Margaret Balaji is currently holding the youth seat on our reference group. She and I work together with the International Youth Alliance on family planning and the youth members of the EAC to develop and disseminate a survey to young advocates across the world and then hold a series of follow-up phone calls to assess what the current youth family planning opportunities and challenges are. This work both informs the youth session during the reference group meeting and also our ongoing youth work. Going forward, we plan to maintain and grow these relationships to ensure that young people are at the core of FP 2020's youth-focused work. I'd now like to make a few specific asks of the EAC. So in September, we would like to hold a call to discuss how we can utilize a package of information which is likely going to be containing what FP20's youth-focused commitments, progress updates, what's in the action plans, as well as CIPs, GFF reports, this really a wealth of information about how young people are being integrated into these plans. We'd like to hold a call to discuss how they can be made the most useful to young advocates, especially at the subnational level. Another ask is that if you are a youth FP expert and you're interested in talking with me on a more regular basis to sort of assess very time-sensitive and important country-specific youth opportunities that you feel both our focal points and young advocates should be aware of. I think the mic is all right. We're just checking the mic. Yeah, sorry about that. And then lastly, again, if you're not necessarily interested in holding quarterly or regular calls with me, but do want to let me know about something very specific you feel, our contact information on the very next slide. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, great. Thank you. Sorry, we had a little technical glitch there, but I think we're back on track. So that's the sum of our briefing for you today, and now we'd love to hear from you. I think that some questions have been coming in, so we'll start with what we've received so we can start our Q&A portion. So the first question is with regard to countries and the plans and strategies and how they all align between what we're calling our country action plans and CIPs. So Eva, I'd love to turn this back to you so you can talk about how these are integrated and based on one another and what that work really is. I know there's sometimes some confusion about what an extra plan means on top of the CIP and things that already exist at the country level.
Well, thank you to whoever wrote that question, and that's certainly an important clarification to make. As I mentioned earlier during the presentation, the focus at the workshops was really for the representatives for the three focal points to really discuss the challenges and priorities within a given country. And obviously, the action plans are meant to draw on a country's specific national family planning strategy, if they have a costed implementation plan, to really be able to bring all of those together in one document that they can work together. Additionally, after the workshop, the focal points, when they went back to their respective countries, were able to engage with other stakeholders, whether it was civil society or other colleagues within their respective teams, to ensure that it really had feedback from others. Additionally, that is the action plan that we use during our quarterly calls that we have here at the Secretariat with the focal points to really ensure that we at the Secretariat can continue to be that resource to the focal points to really ensure that they are accelerating their country's progress, ultimately driven by the commitments that they have made to FP 2020. So really, in essence, we see these action plans as being a bit of that broader view and recognizing, of course, that, those words sometimes action plan or work plan might get thrown around, but this is not meant to be yet another one of those, but instead be more of a cohesive way to bring together some of the priorities and challenges that they're looking ahead to approximately the next 18-month period to be able to address.
Thank you, Eva. Our next question is from Dr. Aslam, who's asking, he says, I'm working with private sectors. There's a communications gap between the private and public sector people, and because of this, sometimes we're unable to provide our expertise to public sector. So I would suggest making a group of EAC members of same country for integration towards same goals. So Martin, I'm going to turn this question to you.
Great, thanks. Thanks very much indeed for the question. What we really aim to do over the course of the next few months is to really improve the data we have and to really be able to express clearly the very, very important role of the private sector. And there's an increasing wealth of information from a range of FP 2020 countries which articulates the fundamental importance of the private sector. So that's the point I would make about data. As far as engagement is concerned, our FP 2020 focal points, government, UNFPA and USAID in most countries, in some countries differed as Eva says, are the conduits for the FP 2020 movement in each of the countries and have a remit to be engaging broadly and deeply with a range of stakeholders in the country, and very importantly again with the private sector. And we would really like to understand those countries in which that process is not necessarily happening as well as it should at the moment. And I'd love to have some information offline to understand how that can happen better. I very much like the idea of convening a group within the expert advisory community to be speaking about the crucial role of the private sector in the countries where acceleration is happening. As I say, it's very clear to us that the private sector are playing a fundamental role. So perhaps I can speak with the questioner offline to get some further comments. But please, everyone, be under no illusions that the private sector is very, very important to the success of FP 2020, and we seek to really broadcast its successes and to have countries really learn from the innovation which is happening in the private sector and to apply it broadly across family planning, service delivery. And perhaps just to link again to the Mobile Outreach Services webinar, where we will be hearing from private sector implementers and indeed understanding mobile outreach in a government context, and understand how that cutting-edge mobile outreach services approach has broad applicability to the acceleration that we need to see to reach our ambitious FP 2020 goals.
Thank you, Martin. And just to remind all of you that you can submit a question in a number of ways. You can either just write it out, as Dr. Aslam did, or let us know that you have a question that you'd like to ask, and we'll turn the mic over to you. If you'd like to speak, you can unmute yourself by hitting *6. Okay. So we have another question. I can't see who it's from because it says unknown, but they're asking Sandra for more information around the rights-based consultation, and if you can share some of the evidence that's been surfaced from these programs that are there. What are they indicating from that? What did you see, and are there some challenges?
Yes, thank you for the question. Of course there are challenges, and they're coming out in the consultation and in the various reports that people presented during the consultation. And again, we'll be putting that up on the web along with all the presentations in September, so you'll be able to get the meeting report and see this. And a lot of it, we are at the point that the programs are in place, they're operational, but the evidence hasn't been completely gathered yet. But we are seeing that there is, even with the best of intentions and programming and such, that there is a disconnect between what the client expectations and desires and needs are and what is frequently provided by the there is looking like there's clearly a need for increased provider training, and that we need to do a lot of work in education of the client so that women know what, women and men, sorry, I'm trying to become better about that, so that they know what they can expect and what they can ask for. And so we're kind of looking at those areas and ways to do training and things like that. But I think once we get all the evidence and once all the program evaluation comes through, we'll be better able to talk about that going forward in this 2017 and kind of pull all the lessons learned and really be able to look at them, interrogate them, and then share this with providers and with donors so we can get started on seriously improving the rights-based approach within programs. I hope that answered the question.
Thank you, Sandra. We have one more question. Again, there's time, so if you have a question, please do submit it. This last question is with regard to the impact of this new approach at the country level. I think this question would be best for you, Eva. Can you reflect on what the focal points have been saying about this process? It sounds like a new level of engagement. There's a lot of work all around. How are they finding this additive? What do you think? I mean, I know it's early days. What is the impact so far? What are you hearing from country colleagues?
Thank you for the question. I think it's over the last few months, it's been a great learning experience for those of us here at the Secretariat, myself included, since I'm 3 months into the job, but I think also for our focal points. As I mentioned during the earlier slides, the more country-driven approach that was launched at the end of last year was really building on the great work that had been done by the Country Engagement Working Group and that Global Focal Point Workshop that was held, and really taking the lessons learned from that and really listening to what the focal points had asked of us as to, what the Secretariat could be and also what it couldn't be. And that's been part of our learning curve over the last few months, really working very closely with the focal points to make sure that we're all on the same page. And so what's been great over the last few months is we started getting some really positive feedback as to our engagement in the country. And as you won't be surprised to hear, of course, that it really varies by country. Every country has very different challenges. They're in different parts of their development and the national family planning strategies they might have, whether it's challenges around trying to come up with the cost and implementation plan, or if they already have one, challenges around how to implement it. So we've gotten some early feedback that we really think this new approach is working, and we're really looking forward to building an even closer relationship with these focal points. Again, we see ourselves at the Secretariat here as a team of folks who really can help them really accelerate that progress. But it really is a country-owned approach, and by no means are we here at the Secretariat the ones that are, dictating what's in these action plans or what their priorities would be. We're really here to help facilitate that process.
Thank you, Eva. I appreciate
Hello.
that.
Hi.
Hello.
I had a question. I have written a question. I'm Dr. Vasanthi from IPARS. Hello.
Please go ahead.
Yeah, my question is basically on the mobile training. There was a slide on that. I just want to know which of the countries this model is being used with the public sector, and what are the broad challenges that they face?
Thank you for the question. I would really encourage you not to not answer your question, but I would really encourage you to join us for that webinar, which will be taking place in 2 weeks' time, where we'll be able to discuss that in depth.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Were there any other questions on the line? Okay, if not, we had another question that came in just asking for more detail about the GFF alignment and what the analysis, what direction we're going in with that analysis as we head into that meeting. So I'll go ahead and answer that question. So again, we're really excited about this opportunity to have the investment group focus on family planning as a key issue for a full day. And so we're working with the Secretariat, or both Secretariats are working together to pull together some analysis in key areas to understand both the potential and what's already in place within the current investment cases and the plans that are rolling forward. We're also looking at what the impact is on what fed into those processes, such as the cost and implementation plans and the work that the countries have already done to position family planning within their RMNCAH continuum of care. What's the landscape for all of that, and then how is family planning fared within that? So the analysis, again, will be country by country to both understand how family planning was positioned within any particular investment case and then what the impact has been to date. And to also understand if there are opportunities country by country to continue to advocate for family planning to be the beneficiary of some of these IDA funds or funds from the investment group itself. So it's an exciting opportunity to really create some shared understanding of where family planning is positioned so that we can really try to explore these opportunities and better advocate for family planning if the GFF continues on to a third wave. So if you have thoughts and ideas about that, we'd love to hear from you and to work with a broader group as well as we develop this to get your perspectives and understandings. I think this is one of those areas where we're creating a shared learning along with a very fast-moving process, and that people are seeing different things from different vantage points. So we do invite you to let us know if that's an area of interest for you or something that you'd like to partner with us on to be stronger as well. So unless we have another question to come in over the phone line, those are the questions that we have so far, so I'll pause for just a moment. Okay, well, I think that's it for now. So we just want to thank you again for your interest in joining us this morning. Please do give us some feedback on how this webinar format worked and our sharing of information as well. This, as you know, is our first time giving you some feedback from the process. So we want to make this as useful for you as possible. And I think another question just came in, so we'll pause for just a moment and then I'll do my final wrap up when we get the last one. So, this one is from Karina Stover. So Karina's asking if the Secretariat will set up a site where we can discuss various topics and can share information. It might be useful and allow people in different zones to join in. Yes, we're happy to do that. Our website allows for both public and password protected microsites where we can use it to with any particular community, and we're happy to do that, particularly if there's documents or areas of interest that any particular group wants to work on. So it's a great idea, and particularly as we work forward on any special issue, getting that feedback from you about what you think would be most useful would definitely be appreciated. I think Suzanne Ehlers has asked a question as well. Suzanne's asking about the possibility of establishing a family planning fund. Is this something that FP2020 is involved in? If so, if not, do you know more that can be shared? So yes, we've heard similar discussions as well. I think some of this has come out of the discussions around the shortfall of funding for the UNFPA supplies program, that a lot of people are trying to think creatively about how family planning entities have the funding necessary in order to expand access to an additional 120 million women and girls, particularly as we look toward universal access and recognize that there's going to need to be a lot more funding that's secure and predictable and available. So that is certainly one of the issues that's on the table. I know that there are some challenges around that, particularly those of you who are familiar with the U.S. government and the funding restrictions that apply there and what a global pooled fund might look like, recognizing that any U.S. legislation that applies for family planning funds would then apply to any sort of pooled process. So people are talking about that, but it's, I think, in extremely early stages, and I certainly don't have any details to share around that. There's no concerted process around just that topic. But again, it's one of the ideas that are out there that I think people are really starting to consider. And I think it's encouraging that there's a lot of creative thinking about what it's going to take to provide the funding long-term and in a sustainable way to ensure that we can grow these programs. And a big piece of that discussion as well is also results-based financing and domestic resource mobilization, and how the community as well can be working with countries who can, especially over time, do more to sustain their own programs, how that dovetails with the total market approach, becomes more of a business model as well. So there are a lot of conversations around what that looks like both globally and at the country level. But to my knowledge, the conversations around a specific family planning fund are still in very nascent stages, and it's not clear to me that it will go in that direction or not. And I think Suzanne has another question. There's an important regional conference in Colombia this September, Reducing Inequalities in SRHR. Is FP2020 involved? And how can we bring about more programs in and attention to the needs of the LAC area? And absolutely, we've been involved since the inception as part of the steering committee on this, and are helping to host this as well. So it is a very exciting opportunity to include this region in the FP 2020 movement, as well as to help support those efforts. And I know that PAI is also on the steering committee for this as well. So I'm going to turn it over to Eva Ross, who's been our point person in talking about this, and Eva can share more details about the conference.
Thanks, Beth, and thanks for the question. As Beth mentioned, we've been very excited to be working with the rest of our colleagues on the steering committee to be planning this. The dates for the conference are Tuesday, September 6th through Thursday, September 8th, and it's meant to piggyback on already the existing Iberoamerica meeting that is taking place in Cartagena, and really taking advantage of the strong political commitment to that meeting, and ensuring that we will have representation from ministers of health from the respective countries in the region, but also the importance of involving civil society representatives, including youth advocates as well for these countries. The agenda is being finalized at the moment, but as soon as it's final, which I expect that'll be probably in the next week or so, we're certainly happy to share it with all of you that might have an interest.
Great, thank you, Eva. We have a couple more questions. So the first is from Tyler Crone, who first of all says hello to everyone. And she had a shared question. All right, sorry. Could you share more granularity around how community and civil society are involved in the development of the country action plans? As we see from the HIV sector and the Global Fund, community and civil society are key partners in leading change. So Martin, why don't we ask you to answer that question?
Thanks very much indeed for the question. So all of our focal points who came to our workshops that Eva set out over the first half of this year were charged with before they came, to engage with the broad range of FP 2020 stakeholders, CSOs, community groups, advocates within their countries before arriving at the workshop to consult on the priorities that they should be putting into their action plans. And we're also then committed as part of their process to be going back into country and sharing the action plan that they had developed with their FP 2020 country engagement working group, technical working groups, and other fora where they should be engaging with community advocates and others. We think that that's happening very well in a significant majority of the FP 2020 countries at this stage, but we are, keenly aware that in some countries that is not happening as well as it should. We continue to work with the focal points to make sure that is indeed a fundamental part of their role, and it is functioning effectively. Just to remind, of course, this action plan is really that set of priorities that is really going to accelerate progress over a 12 to 18 month process. The involvement of community groups, CSOs and others in the formulation of key documents such as costed implementation plans, GFF investment cases and others remain also key touch points where we make sure that advocates are also involved. But we do really want to hear further from you about specific countries in which your intelligence is telling us that this is functioning very well, and countries where this can be improved. We're aware that it is an evolving process, and our focal points are now comfortable in their roles, understand their roles, but need to push the boundaries and make sure that they are really reaching everyone in the country with the information and the action plans and so forth.
Thank you, Martin. So the next question comes from our good friend Monica Kerrigan. So hello, Monica. And your question is, great to see new information posted to country pages. Will you be increasing your focus on data analysis? For example, DHS, PMA 2020, service stats. Can FP2020 lead on the analysis and post regularly? Can you share the data from the reference group this summer and fall? Thanks. So good questions, Monica. Not surprising coming from you as well, as you've always been encouraging us and pushing us to do this type of analysis and be as public as possible as and when we can. So I'll turn most of this over to Martin, but I wanted to just answer the last part of your question about sharing data from the reference group this summer and fall. It's a good question in terms of when the data is ready and what pieces of that can be shared when. We're having our PME working group meeting where they, as Martin said, where they will vet the data and look at that and help to shape it for the report. That meeting will take place in a couple weeks' time. So what I'll do is put this question to them in terms of what from this analysis and from these deliberations can be shared earlier or before the launch of the report. So we don't want to preempt the report and take away from that, but I think you're right if we start asking questions about what from this can we pull earlier so that people have the information as soon as possible. We'll explore that question, recognizing that the countries already have their data because they went through their data consensus workshops, but that doesn't mean that other partners are aware of it as well. So there may be some room within that for how we can share things earlier rather than later. But I'll turn it to Martin for the questions around data analysis and how we share that. Martin?
Yeah, thanks Monica, and thank you, thanks Beth. So absolutely, we really want to have a deeper analysis at country level, and we've obviously been debating this point with the PME working group and with communication and data colleagues here in the Secretariat and others. And I think what we're likely to see come the fall is, yes, an annual report with key analysis across the range of the core indicators, including some special analysis sections, but the country level analysis, we will move that online, and that will give us a greater ability to have very detailed analysis country by country, the 38 commitment making countries, and that list is growing, of course, and of course the entirety of the 69 countries that are there. What will that analysis entail? Well, increasingly we have the ability to be able to now track country progress, to understand which countries are actually on track or close to tracking at their goal. That information will be sort of clearly available in graphical form, as well as some of the disaggregated data that I think you're referring to, Monica, where we do indeed now from deeper analysis of DHS and other national surveys have disaggregated data, for example, understanding in those countries where demand is an issue, and not just looking at the national picture, but looking at the subnational level, understanding key information as far as wealth quintiles, how well we're doing in terms of equitable access to family planning, how well we're doing in terms of young people's access to family planning. The depth of the data that we have now and this country-specific approach, I think, is going to have more information at the fingertips of our focal points of all FP 2020 advocates across the world, and give countries a greater ability to be able to speak about their data. Last point on this is that obviously with the SDGs being country-specific targets now having been set, there is a conversation about where family planning fits in. There was a very good paper that was written by Ellen and Starbird, others, on 17 SDGs, 17 reasons to invest in family planning. We're also working with colleagues in selected countries because we do have a presentation that we can customize with data so that that can be given to countries for advocacy and other purposes. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Martin. We do have two more questions, so I'll take them quickly. We have one from Augustine Asaba, who's been working on to understand modern contraceptive methods among young people in Benin. And his conclusions are that the availability of products tailored to specific needs of young people can increase prevalence. Couldn't agree with you more. So he's wondering if there's an opportunity to work with young people involved in family planning research on the topics related to this theme. So we'll note that for Emily, Augustine, and encourage you to be in contact with her so you can be part of these discussions around our efforts to reach out to young people, because I think that there are things that we can encourage at the country level in terms of support for young people and young researchers, and we certainly want to grow that sector and make sure that we're hearing from folks as well. And then we have a question from Baker Magwa. So good morning to Magwa as well, who notes that there's a lot of data being collected and processed, but that awareness and use of this data at the country level is still very limited. How can this group help? Many of the interested users may not be able to access web-based platforms where data are posted. So we, I appreciate the offer to reach out and talk as well. And so one of the things that we'll do with the PME working group is mention a desire from some of you in this group to also be looped into those discussions in a way that can be helpful as well. And we'll bring this to Jason Bremner about how we might better engage. I think Martin has a comment as well.
Absolutely, and there's a specific work stream which has been formed within the PME working group that is looking at data visibility and data use at the country level. So we will bring that point to them in 10 days' time here in DC.
Thank you, Martin, and thank you for your question, Magwa. So with that, it is now 10 o'clock, and we did a rush of questions, which was really great. So again, please do provide us with feedback about this format, about the length of these briefings. Would you prefer an hour and a half so there's more of an opportunity for some in-depth discussions and Q&A? We want to make this as useful as possible. We'll be following up with a number of your ideas and suggestions about how we can better engage on some of these specific issues. But we really are counting on your feedback to make this a dynamic relationship that's beneficial both to the broader Secretariat work and to you as well, knowing that you're out there really making things happen at the country and global level. So thank you for your partnership and your participation. I guess it's morning, evening, or night, depending on where you are. So with that, we'll say thank you and goodbye. We look forward to the next broad EAC briefing that will take place after our reference group meeting in November. Thank you. Bye-bye. So there was one question about who they should send feedback to. So I think Rati's email address is on there, Rati Bishnoi, rbishnoi@unfoundation.org or familyplanning2020.org. And that's information that's available in the link to this call itself. And then Rati can help share that across the team. Thank you.